Have you ever felt stuck spiritually and you don't know where to go from here? Maybe things are okay, but you just feel like they could be better. You don't know how to make them better, that's the problem. And maybe you're okay with being stuck, but I think for any of us who are wired to make progress, it can be frustrating, right? After all, who wants to just go through the motions? Who wants to just show up at church every week but not feel like it matters? Who wants to open up their Bibles and read it or pray but not feel like it means anything? Well, there is a common reason I've seen why we're stuck, and in this episode, I'm going to show you what that is, and I'm going to give you a simple way to get unstuck spiritually. So welcome to Journey at Home. If you are new to this community, man, we are glad you're here. If you find this helpful, do me a favor. Just hit that subscribe button on YouTube and then hit that bell for notifications, because that is the easiest way that you can help share this content with other people and stay up to date on what we're doing. Now, this is the fifth and final episode of our series, This is the Way, and we named it that because Jesus' earliest followers were called followers of the way. You don't hear that terminology much anymore, but today we just call people Christians, but when you hear Christian today, the problem is you think religious beliefs. You think about a group of people who are opposed to certain things. But the earliest followers of Jesus were not known first and foremost for a set of religious beliefs. They were identifiable and distinguishable by a way of living that Jesus had introduced them to when he was on the earth. And so we've been identifying some of the core behaviors of this way of living that made them unique. These are behaviors that we just want here at Journey. We want them to be core to who we are. So let me just do a quick review for you if you're catching up with us. The first one we talked about was followers of the way prioritize people far from God. People who follow Jesus actually think about people who don't follow Jesus, who aren't in church, who don't have a relationship with God. They think about them more than they think about themselves. The second one is followers of the way live for their community. So they give, they serve, they love in such a powerful, no strings attached kind of way that makes their community a better place, and it shines a light on who Jesus is. The third one is followers of the way are full of grace and truth. They do not settle for the easy extreme of being only truth and making a point, nor do they settle for the easy extreme of giving people a pass and ignoring truth. They are willing to live in the uncomfortable, messy tension of the middle, because that's where Jesus lived. He was full of grace and truth at the exact same time. He never turned down the truth, and he never dialed down the grace. He called sin, sin, and then he paid for it. He refuses to lower the standard, and at the same time, he offers us grace and forgiveness whenever we fail to meet it. Now, the fourth distinctive that we're going to discover today is the key to getting unstuck spiritually. But before we talk about it, I need to catch you up on all the drama of the Real Housewives of Galilee. If you think the Bible's boring, I'm about to change your mind, okay? So you may or may not know that Jesus had a cousin by the name of John. John had a nickname, John the Baptist, okay? He got that nickname because he baptized people. Now, John got himself into trouble with King Herod Antipas because he wouldn't stop criticizing him. Why, you ask? Well, Herod ruled over Galilee for the Roman Empire, and he had taken a trip to Rome where he had stayed with his brother, who was ironically named Herod II. And while he was in Rome staying at his brother's house, he met his brother's wife, who was named Herodias. Are you confused yet? And Herod Antipas fell in love with his brother's wife, Herodias. So Herod Antipas goes back to Galilee. He divorces his wife. He steals Herodias from his brother, and he marries her. So John the Baptist, he wouldn't stop calling Herod Antipas out for what he'd done. He kept, saying, that's wrong, that's wrong. As you can imagine, that didn't go over too well at the royal palace. So Herod had John arrested, but because John was so popular with the people, Herod wouldn't kill him. Now this is where things get really juicy. On Herod's birthday, he throws a big party for all of his buddies. He brings in some dancers for entertainment, and one of the dancers is named Salome. Salome was Herodias' daughter by Herod II, which made Herod Antipas both her uncle and her stepfather, which sounds a lot like a Tennessee family tree, doesn't it? Anyway, just East Tennessee. So this girl is at this party doing her thing, and all the guys are drinking too much, they're all into it. Herod gets caught up in the moment, and he says to Salome, if you'll just keep dancing for us the rest of the night, I'll give you whatever you want, up to half the kingdom. So this girl's got the king right where she wants him. And he's thinking she's going to ask for tickets to a Taylor Swift concert. But instead, she conspires with her mother and says, I tell you what I want the head of John the Baptist on a silver platter. And Herod does not want to do it, but he has made this promise in front of all these guys that he's going to do whatever she wants. So he sends his men. They pull John out of his prison cell. They cut his head off. And literally, they bring it into the banquet on a silver platter. And when word gets back to Jesus that his cousin has been killed in this ridiculous way, he's grieving and he is mourning the loss. And Matthew, who was there, tells us when Jesus heard what happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. And hearing of this, the crowds, they just followed him on foot from the towns. And when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and he healed their sick. Now, I'll be honest, I'd probably been a little upset that I couldn't have some time alone. But Jesus did not respond to his pain and his sorrow that way. He just responded with compassion. So he served these people all day long. And then as evening approached, his disciples, they came to him and they said, okay, this is a remote place, Jesus. It's already getting late. How about you send the crowds away so they can go to the villages around here, they can buy themselves some food. Now, this was a crowd of over 5,000 people, and the disciples, rightly so, were thinking, we need some rest. These people need some food. Let's send them home before we have a big problem on our hands because we can't feed them. But that is not how Jesus sees it. He's about to use this moment to expand their view and understanding of who he is. So Jesus looks back at them and he says, oh, the crowd, they don't need to go away. You just give them something to eat. In other words, there's a need here, but I don't want you to leave it for somebody else to meet it. I want you to do something about the problem that you see. To which they understandably say, well, we have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. In other words, you can't expect us to feed them. We don't have what it takes. We don't have the food. We don't have the time. We don't have the energy. But Jesus looks back at him. He says, okay, you bring those loaves and that fish here to me. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. And then Matthew tells us, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks, and he broke the loaves. Now, remember, the crowd's watching all of this, right? And then he hands this food to the disciples. And imagine you're a disciple standing in front of Jesus at this point. You got thousands of people sitting behind you who now believe they're about to get dinner, but they don't know what you know. You've only got 5 loaves of fish, or 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And Jesus has just prayed over them, and then he's handed them to you, and that's not even enough to fill you up. So what are you going to do? Are you going to turn around? Are you going to start handing it out knowing you're going to run out after about, 10 people? I'm probably going to look at Peter and say, hey, you always like being in charge. How about you take it, because this is crazy. This is a pivotal moment in the relationship of the disciples with Jesus, and to their credit, Matthew says, and we don't know why, but Matthew says they turned around. They started handing the food out to the people. They had no idea what was going to happen. They didn't see how it could possibly work. But here's the key. They trusted Jesus enough to do what he asked them to do, even though it made no sense. And Matthew, who was out there handing out food along with the rest of the guys, tells us that the crowd all ate and they were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 baskets full of broken pieces left over. Now, here's the question I want you to think about. Who was most impacted by that meal? It was not the crowd. The crowd saw the miracle. The crowd got to benefit from the miracle, but they were spectators to the miracle. They were observers. They were consumers. They were in the stands watching. You know who was most impacted that day? Yeah, it was the disciples. They were the ones who not only got to see a miracle, they got to be part of a miracle. They were the ones whose understanding of God broadened and whose trust in Jesus deepened in that moment. They were the ones whose spiritual growth was taken to a new level. It got unstuck because they did what they could do, which was, all right, I'm going to turn around and start handing out food. And because of that, they got to see Jesus do what only he could do, which was multiply that food so everybody could eat. Listen, this is how God always works. When you do what you can do, then Jesus will always do what only he can do. It is the reason why I encourage you to serve others, whether it's through our church or some other way. You think it's about helping the church out. You think, it's about helping meet somebody's need. But no. This is how you grow. This is how you get unstuck spiritually. This is how you come to know God better. You take a step of faith. You do what you can do. You give a little bit of your time when you don't feel like it, or when you got plenty of other things to do, or when you're going through a hard time, or when you're dealing with your own struggles. You turn your focus to serving somebody else, or giving to somebody else, or doing what God's asking you to do that you don't want to do. You just do it anyway. You do what you can do. And every time you do that, Jesus steps in and he does what only he can do. And it ignites spiritual growth in your own life. Now, when I talk about serving specifically, some of you think, I'm not equipped for that. I'm not educated for that. Or I don't know enough to do that, or I'm too busy, or I've got too many challenges right now. I've been there and I've done that before. I'm telling you, the best thing for you is to stop focusing on you and focus on serving somebody beside you. Because if you will take a step to get involved, to trust God, if you'll take a little bit of your time, a little bit of your money, a little bit of your energy, and do what you can do, what God's asking you to do, listen, He will show up in your life. And He will take what you've done and then do what only He can do with it. Followers of the way, they take bold steps of faith. Followers of Jesus don't settle and get stuck. They don't get comfortable and just consume. Followers of the way move when Jesus says to move, and they act when He says to act, even if they don't know how it's going to work out. That is exactly what faith is supposed to look like. You do what you can do, and you trust Jesus to do what only He can do. So here's my question for you. When is the last time you took a bold step of faith and you trusted God enough to act, even when you weren't sure how it was going to work out or whether it would work out for you? Maybe today needs to be the day you take that step.